session with Tatiana Juel from Danish Business Authority. Tatiana manages the Danish Business Authority's one-stop shop for new business models, which is a single point of entry that helps businesses ease their way through the regulatory landscape and bring their ideas to market quickly. Tatiana will share best practice with us from Denmark about an extremely interesting and relevant topic, which is regulatory sandboxes. And as a reminder, regulatory sandboxes allow businesses to safely test and also interact with regulators. Businesses can test their products and make sure that they are compliant. It is a place for trial and error, but is also a great way, in my opinion, to break the barrier between the regulator and the economic sector. So the title of Tatiana's talk is How Regulatory Sandboxes Can Promote Innovation and Create Better Regulation. Now this session will last, I suppose now, around 40 minutes. But of course, your views are very important for us. We wish for the discussions to be interactive, so please do participate in the Q&A. Please do put your questions in the chat. And with that, I'm going to pass the floor to Tatiana, who I believe has also a presentation for us. Tatiana, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me to participate today. As you said, I work with the Danish Business Authority. We're part of the Danish Ministry of Industry, Business and Financial Affairs. And I work in an office which overall aims at promoting green and responsible business development. And as you said, my focus area is innovation-friendly regulation. In our day-to-day work here at the office, we can see that many startups and innovative companies often encounter rules which are either unclear or outdated when they are developing new technologies, which can benefit society and the green transition, but they're hampered in their way to the market. As part of my work with innovation-friendly regulation, I'm currently heading a working group in the relatively newly established Agile Nations Network. And here we're currently making a case catalog on regulatory sandboxes. And I would like to introduce you both to the Agile Nations Network and the case catalog. But first, a few more words about the topic of my presentation, which is how can regulatory sandboxes promote innovation and create better regulation? Let me just start off by saying I do not have the final answer to this question, but I hope to give you some insights into current cases and also especially to inspire further seeking of and sharing of knowledge in this field. So I'm aware that the topic of this conference is artificial intelligence, but I'm also going to speak more broadly about tools for regulating emerging technologies with this special focus on the sandboxes. So as many of you are probably already aware, the sandboxes were a concept was initially developed in the financial services sectors, where regulators found that emergence of new fintech solutions to some extent challenged current regulation. With the regulatory sandbox, a space was created where regulators and policymakers could investigate new technologies in dialogue with startups and innovative businesses. So the purpose was to create a safe space that allowed for test and development of innovative fintech solutions, while at the same time upholding necessary protections for consumers and society. And based on lessons learned, regulators could allow for innovations and at the same time evaluate whether current regulation was still fit for purpose, or, for example, if they needed to issue new guidance. An example of this is the Danish FinTech Sandbox, which has enabled testing of new machine learning models for assessing house sales prices. In the sandbox, the Danish Financial Conduct Authority explored how the model and its output could be described and documented. There was also an issue with current regulation, which stipulated that a physical inspection must take place when assessing these housing sales prices. And following testing, the Danish Financial Conduct Authority was able to issue new guidance to the sector as a whole on how machine learning could be used in this field. And so these years, we see that the concept of regulatory sandboxes has spread to other sectors, where it is used by regulators and policymakers to gain insights into the potentials and the challenges of emerging technologies. If we could go to slide 2. I'm not sure who's managing that. Am I managing the slide myself? No, I'm not. Okay. So I just brought you some quotes from the OECD, the World Economic Forum, and the European Union, because regulatory sandboxes is definitely a subject of interest for all these organizations. The OECD specifically recommends that governments enable greater experimentation with a view to the fact that these innovations can help solve some of the larger society issues we're facing as societies. The World Economic Forum has also noted how unclear regulation can hamper innovation, and recently the European Union, the Council of the European Union, issued a conclusion on regulatory sandboxes to encourage use of these and also knowledge sharing in the field. And which is also a key point from the OECD and the World Economic Forum to share knowledge. And it was also to this end that the Agile Nation Network was formed. If we can jump to the next slide. It was formed in 2002 by a group of countries and with assistance from the World Economic Forum. And the purpose of this network is to enable testing of new technologies, also cross borders. It's an open network. We invite interested countries to take part. And it's also in this network that I'm heading this work with creating a catalog on regulatory sandboxes. If we jump to the next slide. So we in the Agile Nations conducted a survey that was actually similar to a survey conducted by the Slovenian presidency in the European Union, which asked some overall questions. Does your institution have any examples of regulatory sandboxes? Do you have any examples of other tools that might not fit this definition, but is similar? And can you perhaps share evaluations and key lessons learned? And so we collected a lot of data on how these sandboxes are actually organized, when they were established, what's the legal basis, what's the eligibility criteria to participate, and so on, as well as looking at the impacts on lawmaking process. Then we can jump to the next slide. So we managed to collect 69 cases from a total of 23 countries. As you can see, the survey answers show that these sandboxes are being used across a wide array of sectors. Financial services and mobility are definitely the sectors where most countries are either using or planning to use sandboxes, followed by energy, ICT, and data. And then we have quite a few horizontal crosscuts, like involving all sector sandboxes. And then we also have some examples from the health area. Financial services obviously includes fintech, insurance, banking. Mobility includes drones, shipping, self-driving vehicles and units, as well as autonomous shipping. ICT and data includes artificial intelligence, use of data, smart cities, and energy has a particular focus on renewable energy sources. And we also have one example on nuclear plants. So let's jump to the next slide. So there are no, there's not a absolutely universally agreed upon definition of sandboxes, but they do have similar traits. First and foremost, it's a space where regulators can temporarily derogate from existing regulation, provided that experimentation takes place in a safe manner. Experimentation can take place on paper or with data sets, and it can also take place in real life, either in physical test zones or in public areas. And then last but not least, guidance from regulators is really key. And it's worth noting that not all sandboxes can derogate from law, but all sandboxes provide guidance. And some regulators also note that guidance in many cases is actually sufficient. Sometimes you do not need to derogate from law or to change the law at hand. Let's see. Well, let's jump to the next slide. So I brought some examples from each sector on how the purpose of the sandboxes and how it affected regulations in the cases where it did. Because the sandboxes often say that they would like for the sandbox to inform regulation, but given the fact that many sandboxes are still relatively new, we're yet to see the full effect on regulation and innovation. But I brought examples where something actually has happened. In the United Kingdom, the regulatory sandbox for fintech was established back in 2016. And the Financial Conduct Authority has said that these sandbox testing insights played a key role in the development of the FCA's policy work on crypto assets, open banking, and other areas. It allowed the FCA to see how new technologies and innovations work in the market, what works for consumers and what doesn't, what risks arise from new technologies, and what controls can be put into place to mitigate those risks. So that's the financial services sector. I'm just going to run through each example, and I guess we're taking questions, dialogue at the end, Ayisha?
Yes, but you have time. So I think, it's good that you present with your own, because we don't have many right now. So I'd rather you actually share properly what you're saying.
I'll just keep speaking. Next slide, please. In the mobility sector, I have an example from Canada where a regulatory sandbox for remotely piloted aircraft systems, or drones in short, was established in 2019 to allow for operations beyond visual line of sight. That means you can't, obviously you can't see the drone when it's so far away you can't see it. And Transport Canada stated that the informations and lessons learned from the issuance of these certificates to conduct these drone flights has created the foundation for Transport Canada's upcoming regulatory framework for lower risk beyond visual line of sight operations. So here you have an example of a regulator very actively going out and using the sandbox to seek information on creating a whole new regulatory framework. Next slide, please. In the energy sector, I brought an example from Denmark. In 2019, we established a regulatory sandbox for energy technologies. The purpose was to enable innovative energy technologies, energy supply, and storage solutions. And today, the Danish Energy Agency has found that through the sandbox, they have improved their understanding about specific provisions in the Danish energy regulation that the sector perceives as an impediment or challenge to the development of the sector. So I think a point here is also that in a way, the sandbox here can also be seen as a mean of, usually when you have a new law, you send it out into a formal hearing. This is like a pre-hearing. This is where it's a tool for gathering and informing information before you issue new law. So the Danish Energy Agency has said that they at some point will create new law, and they believe that the sandbox will help inform them for the draft for this. Next slide, please. So in Singapore, they made a regulatory sandbox for telemedicine and mobile medicine in 2018. Also to create a safe environment where they could test these new models. Following testing, Singapore has listed direct telemedicine service providers who have demonstrated that they are aware of the risks and benefits of telemedicine, and that they are following practice guidelines set out by the ministry. So here you actually have an effect on providers who are able to enter the market following the sandbox. And finally, I have another example from the UK. That's the next slide, please. The United Kingdom has a data protection regulatory sandbox, which aimed at supporting companies who are creating products and services which utilize personal data in innovative and safe ways. And here there's actually no flexibility and no possibility to derogate from law. The purpose of the sandbox is to support privacy by design and to help organizations figure out how they can develop their services and at the same time process personal data in a safe and ethical manner. So those were my 5 examples. Those are the good examples. A lot of the sandboxes that we heard from are still looking at what the projects will mean for regulation. Yes. What do I have on the next slide? Yeah, that's it. To conclude, I would like to say that the whole purpose of this endeavor is not to make a document that's set in stone. We see it as a living document, and we also see it as an open invitation to anyone who's interested in contributing to our work. The next step for the case catalog will be a quality test check over the next month or so with all the government agencies who are mentioned in the case catalog. It's around 200 pages long. And we're looking forward to sharing it at a later point in time.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. We have one question, in fact, from Elliot, and I was even wondering if Elliot, you could come out and say it. You might want to do it live. But before we go there, I had one as well, Tatiana, because it's just trying to, it's wonderful to see that. And I know that it's also relevant for us. And if I'm now thinking from a Swiss perspective, the question is, and very practically, you have these, you talked about the Agile network that exists. Is it only governments that are becoming part of that, or can individual companies also become part? That's the first part of the question.
Yes, it's actually aimed at government because it's aimed at supporting knowledge sharing between government agencies on how they can work with innovation-friendly regulation. But with the activities we are inviting in companies. So, for example, in my working group, once we finish the catalog, we would like to do webinars on innovation-friendly regulation in certain sectors. And there we would like to invite companies to share their experiences with sandboxes or share their perspective on what is needed for innovation-friendly regulation. So in that sense, it is open to a wider set of
it is open. But then for those that are still thinking, so I know, for example, in Canton of Zurich, we're thinking about this approach overall in terms of sandboxes, and regulatory sandboxes could be maybe a subset of that. So what would be like the steps? Is there? Do we just reach out? Do we reach out to you and we try to sort of have a bilateral kind of discussions and then go there? And what is a concrete way to go about it? And that is, of course, relevant not just for Switzerland, but all of the other countries and companies that are listening to us from the other parts of the world as well.
We're trying to have a very informal approach, so coffee meetings, webinars, and we in Denmark also learn from helping connect other people and listening in on their discussions. And in Denmark, we're also trying to inspire other Danish ministries who do not currently have sandboxes to look at this as a possible tool. And we have dedicated some resources to being sort of a contact point. So we'd be happy to pick up if you reach out.
Perfect. Question from Elliot. Elliot, you want to ask it yourself, perhaps? You've got two.
Thanks, Ayisha. And
Perfect.
Thank you, Tatiana, for the interesting presentation. This might be a bit, I hope it's not too much of a digression to ask whether you've learned that regulators should informally correct problems by talking with the companies and learning from them and trying to correct issues by talking with them versus a more formal enforcement approach where there are financial or other penalties. And do sandboxes tell us about one or the other approach? And are there some conditions or sectors where you might need the former versus the latter?
Well, thank you for the question. Good question. I don't see it as an either or. I think something I forgot to mention was that a very important part of sandboxes is also to communicate results to the wider sector, because it's important with the sandbox not to give preferential treatment to one company aside from others. So right. It shouldn't be informal in that sense. All results should be communicated, and it's always a criteria as a company. You have to say, I'm okay with that. Of course, business secrets won't be shared, but everything that can be communicated will. So I really think it should be seen as a supplement to how you work as a government agency. And I also think you should be aware that for many companies working with emerging technologies, they're not necessarily organized in business organizations, so they're not able to communicate their needs as clearly and as timely as those established companies, which are part of a business organization, which are aware, oh, now we have a hearing coming up on this new European law, this new national law. So in a way, I think you're also a little obliged as a government agency to open this avenue as a way of paying attention to what is going on in the business community.
Okay.
Thank you.
And another question, Elliot, or I move to one in the chat?
Yeah, a quick follow-up, which maybe this is, I think your answer will probably be the same, is do you see separate roles for judges versus regulators, that kind of related to our session earlier, in terms of, they say that judges can often make decisions more on a case by case, and regulators need to promulgate more general rules to make things more flexible. Or can judges help with that? And kind of the same question, like, are there some cases where you need regulators versus judges making decisions?
Well, I think also there's also an important distinction between guidance and counseling. And as a government agency, you can actually only provide guidance unless you provide, it's clear that now you're getting a decision from a government agency. Usually you have to pay for that, some fee, and then you have a decision and that holds. But otherwise, it is actually guidance that's taking place in the sandboxes. So I think that's different from being a judge and making a decision. But I'm not sure. Do you feel
that makes good sense? Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
So there's one more question here with regards to the EU AI Act, Tatiana. As you know,
Yes.
that there is this other aspect. So one aspect is, of course, some of the constraints that are coming through, but the other is also to try to empower the innovation. And one part of it is sandboxes, right? And the question really is, and my understanding is, even within the discussions now, there is more discussions on how these should be treated and what should be happening with them and should be brought in. I mean, maybe for the audience, if you could just tell us a little bit what's happening in that particular area under the context of the EU AI Act.
I am aware that negotiations are taking place, but I'm not a direct part of it.
Okay.
So I'm afraid I'm not able to share much on that. But I'm aware that there are discussions about regulatory sandboxes in that regard also, which I see as a positive.
Yes.
Because we are coming with quite strict regulation. We should also make government agency comfortable with exploring the opportunities in AI.
Perfect. And then we have another, it's more like a comment, also saying that you should also consider some examples from Latin America. Do you have actually countries from Latin America that you're working with? Are they reaching out? Is there a way for them to do that? Apparently,
I would love to have examples from that part of the world. We've only looked at, I looked at the European survey, and then we have the members of the Agile Nations. But it's now we have the format for the case catalog. So I would love to add some examples from the rest of the world.
Okay, so what I can say is, if we have interested parties, they can sort of come to us, and we can try to see if we can raise it over to you in that case.
Oh yes,
so,
definitely. Yes.
Perfect. Well, that's a little bit all we have right now. Anybody else with any questions here? No, not really. There is just some information. Well, so I think with that, I would say thank you so much. Wonderful to have had you. I am hoping to, of course, continue the dialogue also out of the forum with you. I think you're doing incredible work, and it's wonderful to have this contact. And I think that sort of goes to what this whole platform is all about, is to make those bridges between, the different countries and the different great work that has been happening. So thank you, Tatiana, for being part of our discussion, to being part of our expert groups here with RegHorizon and ETS Center for Law and Economics.